students. Now this is the need of the hour to have online classes. So far in the classroom we have learned about general characters of mollusk, its classification, digestive system in Unio, its reproduction, life cycle and development. Now today I'll teach you the circulatory system in Unio. Now in Unio, the circulatory system is of open type. There are two types of circulatory system, as you all know, closed type and open type. And here it is open type. And the main components of circulatory system includes the blood, the circulating fluid, and the main organs that are involved in the process of circulation is heart, which in turn consists of the chambers like the auricles, the ventricles, the arteries and the veins and other stuff. So let's learn it one by one. Now here the diagram that I have drawn, I have just drawn a schematic diagram of the circulatory system so that there is a constraint of space also, and I just don't want it to be too clumsy. The diagram that I shared with you from the textbook, it also shows the same thing, but it has been superimposed on the digestive system of Unio, wherein you can see the digestive system in the dotted line, and over that they have shown the circulatory system as well. Fine. So here what I have done, in order to put it more clearly, I have just drawn the schematic representation of the circulatory system in Unio. Now we were talking about the type of circulatory system and we said it is of open type. Then when you talk about blood in case of Unio, it is colorless. But when you look at mollusks in general, few mollusks have this, the blood contains hemocyanin because of the copper containing pigment, and hence the blood will show a little bluish tinge in it. Whereas in case of Unio, it is colorless. Now, other than this, the blood contains some leukocytes, which are phagocytic cells. These leukocytes may be both granular or agranular, and they do the function of phagocytosis. Coming to heart. Now, heart in case of Unio is three-chambered. Meaning it contains two auricles, which in turn is connected to a ventricle. Now this heart, which is three-chambered, is covered by a cavity, or it's covered by a pericardium, which in turn encloses a cavity called as pericardial cavity, and inside this cavity you find a fluid filled, and this fluid we call it as pericardial fluid. This helps in absorbing the shock when the heart beats. Do you know, in case of Unio, the heart beats at around 20 to 100 times per minute. That is the rate of the heartbeat in case of Unio. Now, these auricles, we said they are three-chambered and it contains two auricles and one ventricle. These two auricles, they are thin-walled cavities, and they receive the blood, they receive oxygenated blood from the gills, and we will learn like how the oxygenated blood comes to the auricles. When these auricles contract, they pump the blood to the ventricles, and the reverse will never happen because there are valves that prevent the backflow of the blood. And this aperture through which the auricles pumps the blood to the ventricle, it's called as auricoventricular aperture, and this is guarded by valves, which in turn prevents the backflow of blood. And when compared to auricles, these ventricles are little thick walled cavities, and this ventricle pumps the blood to different parts of the body. That's how the heart functions here. Coming to the arteries. Now, what is the main function of an artery? Generally, arteries carry oxygenated blood from the heart to different parts of the body. Here also, there are n number of arteries that originate from the heart, and then if you look at the diagram, this shows the main arteries that takes blood to different parts of the body of an Unio. Now to put it simply, what I will do, first I will tell you the names of the major arteries, how they are branched and to which region it supplies the blood. Fine. So here from the here you will find two auricles and these auricles lead into ventricle. This ventricle, both the ends of the ventricle, like the anterior end and the posterior end, the anterior end of the, from the anterior end of the ventricle, it gives out a main branch called as anterior aorta. Now, since this is the main artery that is coming out from the heart, you call it as aorta. Since it is in the anterior end, you call it as anterior aorta. There's one more main artery that is given out from the posterior end of the ventricle, and that is called as posterior iota. They are named based upon their positions, right? Now this anterior aorta, it continues to the anterior end, and in the meantime this splits into three main arteries. I label this as 1, this as 2 and this as 3. So this anterior aorta is split into three main branches. Now what are these three branches? The first one is anterior pallial artery. Anterior because it is towards the anterior end. Pallial means also the mantle. So this is the branch of this anterior aorta that supplies blood to the mantle of the anterior side. So this anterior pallial artery takes the oxygenated blood from the heart to the mantle. It supplies blood to the mantle. Fine. The second branch, this second branch of this main anterior aorta, this branches out to give blood or supply blood to the foot, and hence it is called as pedal artery because it supplies to the foot region. Now the third branch, either you can name these arteries this way, 1, 2, 3 or 1, 2, 3, it doesn't make any difference. The only thing is you should label them correctly. Now this branch is, from here this branches out and this you call it as visceral artery. Why? Because this branch goes and supplies blood to the visceral organs. Now this visceral artery branches into four main sub-branches. One is gastric artery. Gastric refers to stomach. Why it is called gastric artery is because it supplies blood to the stomach. The next one is hepatic artery. This hepatic artery supplies blood to the digestive gland. If you remember, while discussing about the digestive system, we said the stomach is surrounded by the digestive gland, which is nothing but the hepatopancreas, which works as a liver. So hepatic means liver. Here this artery supplies blood to the digestive gland and hence it is called as hepatic artery. Then further it branches into intestinal artery. It supplies blood to the loop of the intestine. And then the next one is called as gonadal artery. Gonadal means gonads. This supplies blood to the gonads. And you know that the intestine loops out into coils, and around these coils you find the gonads being present. So one branch of this visceral artery supplies blood to the intestine. The other branch supplies to gonadal artery. Is it clear? I'll just repeat it again. From the ventricle, there is an origination, there originates two main branches or two main aortas. One is the anterior aorta and the second one is posterior aorta. Anterior aorta it runs all along the anterior side of the Unio. It further branches into three main branches. One is the anterior pedial artery supplying blood to the mantle. The second one is the pedal artery supplying blood to the foot. The third one is the visceral artery supplying blood to the visceral organs. And this visceral artery splits into four main arteries: the gastric artery, the hepatic artery, the intestinal artery and the gonadal artery, supplying blood to the stomach, the digestive gland, intestine and the gonads. Now, coming to this posterior aorta. This posterior aorta runs along the posterior side of the Unio, and it gives off only one branch, which you call it as a rectal artery, that supplies blood to the rectum, and then it continues down as posterior pallial artery. Posterior pallial artery, wherein it supplies blood to the mantle. Now, this is the course of circulation of oxygenated blood from the heart to different parts of the body. So, all this will suffice for your arteries. Now, talking about the veins. Now, we know that the heart is pumping and it is supplying the oxygenated blood to all different parts of the Unio. Whereas, how does this oxygenated blood comes to the heart? Meaning, once this oxygenated blood is supplied to these tissues or the organs, then there should be some system to collect the deoxygenated blood from the tissues or the organs and then put it back into the gills for the process of oxygenation, and then it is collected and put back to the auricles. Now, this job is done by the veins. Veins mainly collect the deoxygenated blood from the tissues and the organs, and they put it back into the main blood vessels, that is the main vena cava, which is the major vein here, and then that deoxygenated blood is taken to the lungs for the process of oxygenation, and from the lungs it is put back into the the oxygenated blood is put back into the auricles so that it is supplied again to all parts of the body. Now let us see one by one, like what are the veins that collect deoxygenated blood in Unio. Veins are marked here in red. I hope it is clear to you. Here, the main vein, as I said, is this vena cava. Now, why I call this as a major vein here is because this vena cava receives blood. What type of blood? The deoxygenated blood from the stomach or this visceral area through the main vein called as the visceral vein. Now, this visceral vein is split into four, like the visceral artery, as the gastric vein. I've just labeled it as GB, that means gastric vein, into hepatic vein, HV I've written, IV stands for intestinal vein, and GV stands for gonadal vein. So, the name represents the particular organ from which the deoxygenated blood has been picked up. They pick up blood from all this and pour it into one major vein called as the visceral vein, and there is one more vein here called as the pedal vein, which picks up blood from the foot region, and this is also put into this vena cava, right? So when the pedal vein and the visceral vein joins together to form this major vein known as vena cava. Now, the deoxygenated blood from the vena cava, it is taken to a vein called taken to kidneys, which are the excretory organs, through afferent renal vein. Now, in class while discussing, I mentioned that afferent means the one which brings blood to the organ. Efferent is the one which takes away the blood from the organ. So in that context, afferent renal vein here, this one, this brings blood to the kidneys. Now what kind of blood is this? It is a deoxygenated blood which is collected from the visceral organs and the foot, poured it into the vena cava, and this vena cava is bringing this deoxygenated blood to kidney for the process of removal of nitrogenous waste. Now once this is done, this efferent renal vein, now what is the job of efferent? It has to pick up the blood from the kidneys. So this efferent renal vein picks up the blood. What kind of blood? The deoxygenated blood which is without nitrogenous waste, and puts the blood into a main vein which is called as afferent tenoidal vein. Why afferent? This vein is putting the blood to the gills. It is bringing blood to the gills, so we call it as afferent. Tenoidal, tenoidia refers to gills. So since this major blood vessel is bringing the deoxygenated blood into the gills, we call it as afferent tenoidal vein. So this afferent tenoidal vein brings the blood to the gills for the process of oxygenation. Now in gills what happens? You come across the exchange of gases. Carbon dioxide is given out, oxygen is picked up from this circulating water, and the blood gets oxygenated, and this oxygenated blood from the gills is picked up by efferent tenoidal vein. Right? Here this efferent tenoidal vein, this picks up the blood from the gills. What kind of blood it is picking up? It is picking up the oxygenated blood from the gills or the tenoidia, and this pours this oxygenated blood into the auricles here. So what happened? The auricles received oxygenated blood now. From where did this oxygenated blood come from? It came through the efferent tenoidal vein from the tenoidia, right? So what happened in this tenoidia? Here the process of oxygenation took place, and for the blood to get oxygenated, it was brought from the kidneys, and who poured it into the kidneys? The afferent renal veins. And who supplied blood to the afferent renal veins? The vena cava. How did this vena cava receive deoxygenated blood? It came through the visceral vein and the pedal vein. Fine. So this is how the veins, they pick up deoxygenated blood from the visceral organs and the foot, and they form a single vein called as visceral vein, and this visceral vein along with the pedal vein continues to form as a major vein called as the vena cava, and this vena cava pours the blood into the afferent renal vein, which puts the blood into the kidney for the process of removal of nitrogenous waste. Once the nitrogenous waste is removed, the blood is picked up by the efferent renal vein and it is poured into the gills through afferent tenoidal vein. Now here in the tenoidia, the process of oxygenation takes place, and once the blood gets oxygenated, it is picked up by the efferent tenoidal vein and it is poured into the auricles. Thereby the auricles receive oxygenated blood into them, and the auricles will pump the blood forward into the ventricle, and from the ventricle the blood is pumped into the anterior aorta and the posterior aorta. From the anterior aorta the blood grows to these three branches, that is anterior pallial artery, pedal artery and the visceral artery, and the blood gets supplied to all parts of the body. Yes, this is how the blood gets oxygenated, poured it into the heart and gets supplied throughout the body of Unio. And there's one more point to mention here. When these paleal arteries supply blood to the mantle, a portion of the blood also gets oxygenated in the mantle, and that blood is also directly poured through this paleal vein into the heart. Here if you see, this blood vessel is directly connecting to the heart. This is nothing but the paleal vein which takes up oxygenated blood into the auricle. Because mantle also have an ability to bring in this process of oxygenation. So from here it is taken or it is supplied back into the auricle. So this is how the process of oxygenation takes place in Unio. Now the other main feature or the other main region of this circulatory system is the sinuses. Now what are sinuses? They are nothing but the lacunae or the spaces that you find wherein the blood is just released into that space. Now why we call it as a spinous or why we call it as a sinus or a space is because that lack this epithelial lining of the true blood vessels. So the blood will not flow through a proper blood vessel, rather it just gets diffused into that lacunae. Now here in case of molars, you do not find any capillaries except in cephalopods, and that is the reason why we call it as an open type of circulatory system, because of the presence of these sinuses. Now as you see here, I have mentioned it as a pedal sinus. That means the artery, when it brings blood to the foot, there is no direct exchange between this pedal artery and the pedal vein. The arteries will supply blood and then it is released into this sinus. This pedal vein will directly pick the blood from the sinuses and put it back into the visceral vein. So like that you have few pockets of lacunae or sinuses from which the deoxygenated blood is picked up by the veins, and because of that you call this as open type of circulatory system. I hope you all understood this. You can give me your feedback, and to summarize all this, I'll tell you, or I'll put the whole thing in a flow chart to explain you how the course of blood circulation takes place in Unio. We said that heart is the main organ of pumping here. So from the heart, the blood goes to the anterior aorta and the posterior aorta. From the anterior aorta, it gives rise to three main branches. One is anterior paleal artery that goes to the mantle. Then